The sun was shining brightly as Sarah, a 38-year-old school teacher from Oregon, smiled at her daughter Lily, who was just 10 years old. They were both wearing bright orange life vests and sitting in a small wooden boat, floating down a calm river deep in the Amazon jungle. Behind them sat their guide, a quiet man named Rodrigo who knew the forest like the back of his hand. Sarah had planned this trip for months. It was her way of giving Lily something special before school started again. They wanted to see wild animals, hear strange bird sounds, and sleep under the stars. Sarah's husband, Michael, had stayed behind because of work, but he supported their adventure. "You too go and explore," he had said. "Just be safe and come back with stories." Sarah had promised they would. At first, everything went perfectly. The river was peaceful, the jungle was full of life, and Rodrigo seemed to know every tree and sound in the forest. He pointed out colorful parrots flying above, monkeys swinging from branches, and even showed them a giant sloth sleeping on a tree. Sarah took pictures of everything, and Lily laughed the whole time. They spent 2 days traveling by boat, stopping to sleep in tents on the riverbank. On the third day, Rodrigo said they would go inland, following a trail to a beautiful waterfall only locals knew about. Sarah was excited, and Lily jumped with joy. They packed food, water, and supplies and began walking through the thick green jungle. But something felt different once they left the river. The trees were taller and closer together. The ground was muddy, and the air was thicker. Bugs buzzed everywhere, and strange sounds echoed from the trees. Rodrigo seemed more serious now. He walked carefully, always looking around. Sarah noticed but didn't say anything. She trusted him. They walked for hours, stopping to rest under a large tree. "We're almost there," Rodrigo said, wiping sweat from his face. But after another hour, they still hadn't found the waterfall. That's when it happened. Rodrigo stopped suddenly. "Something's wrong," he whispered. He looked around and said, "This is not the path. I don't recognize this area." Sarah felt her heart sink. "What do you mean?" she asked, trying to stay calm. Rodrigo admitted that the path had changed. Maybe a storm had knocked trees down. Maybe animals had covered the trail. Whatever it was, they were lost. At first, Sarah stayed calm. She didn't want to scare Lily, who was now holding her hand tightly. They tried retracing their steps, but every tree and plant looked the same. Rodrigo used his machete to mark trees as they walked, hoping it would help them find their way back. But night came quickly in the jungle, and they had to stop. They set up a small camp, shared some food, and tried to stay dry during a short rain. Sarah kept Lily close, telling her stories to help her sleep. But inside, she was scared. They had no phone signal, no way to call for help, and nobody knew exactly where they were. Back home in Oregon, Michael started to worry when he didn't hear from Sarah after 4 days. She had promised to message him every evening, using a satellite phone provided by the tour company. He waited 1 more day, then called the company. They said the guide was expected to return with Sarah and Lily on the 6th day. When the 6th day came and went, Michael's worry turned into panic. He flew to Brazil that same night. Within 24 hours, he was standing at the edge of the jungle, talking to police and rescue teams. Helicopters flew over the trees, search dogs were brought in, and boats searched the river. But there was no sign of Sarah, Lily, or Rodrigo. It was like they had disappeared into thin air. 9 days had passed since Sarah and Lily had vanished in the jungle. Search teams were working day and night, but still no clue was found. Michael didn't want to believe they were truly lost. He stayed near the search camp, sleeping in a tent and refusing to leave until his wife and daughter were found. Every morning, he joined the rescue teams as they looked through thick vines, muddy trails, and steep hills. The heat was unbearable, and the insects made everything worse. But Michael didn't care. He only cared about finding Sarah and Lily. He kept thinking, what if they're hungry? What if they're hurt? What if they're calling for me right now? Deep in the jungle, Sarah was doing her best to survive. They had now been lost for over a week. The food they packed was almost gone, and clean water was getting harder to find. Rodrigo had tried to lead them in different directions, hoping to find the river again. But the jungle was too confusing. Paths twisted in strange ways. Sometimes they thought they were making progress, only to end up where they started. Sarah kept strong for Lily, even when she wanted to cry. Lily, though scared, listened to her mom and tried not to complain. She picked berries when Rodrigo said they were safe, and she helped gather wood for small fires. At night, they huddled together under a tarp, trying to keep dry and warm. One evening, they heard a helicopter in the distance. Sarah jumped up and waved her arms. Rodrigo lit a small fire and threw green leaves into it to make smoke. They shouted, but the trees were too thick. The helicopter passed overhead, without seeing them. Sarah collapsed to the ground, sobbing. Rodrigo clenched his jaw. "We must keep trying," he said. "We cannot stop." The next day, they kept walking, though their feet were blistered and their clothes soaked from the rain. Lily was weaker now. She hadn't eaten much in days. Sarah carried her sometimes, whispering, "Just a little longer, sweetheart. Just hold on." Meanwhile, Michael had hired a group of local jungle trackers, men who had lived in the Amazon their whole lives. They were not part of the official police rescue, but they knew the forest better than anyone. One of them, an older man named Joao, looked at Michael with serious eyes and said, "Sometimes the jungle hides, but sometimes it leaves signs." Joao believed if Sarah or Lily had tried to leave any marks, like broken branches, scratches on trees, or symbols carved into bark, those might still be there. So Michael and the trackers began searching slower, carefully examining trees and rocks as they moved. Weeks went by. Everyone started to lose hope, but Michael refused to give up. He didn't sleep much. He looked thinner and tired, but his eyes stayed sharp. On the 34th day, Joao called him over to a tree. "Look," the man said. On the bark was something carved deep into the wood. It was faint, but clearly written, "Help," and a heart. Below it was a date, 2 weeks old. Michael's heart beat faster. "It's her," he whispered. "Sarah." The rescue team checked the area, but there were no other signs. Still, it gave Michael new strength. He told the team, "She's alive? I know it. We keep going." Back in the jungle, Sarah was growing weaker too. Her arms were covered in mosquito bites, and her legs ached. Rodrigo had injured his ankle 2 days ago, making it harder to walk. But on the 45th day, Sarah spotted something. A tree with smooth bark, and an idea. She used Rodrigo's knife to carve something into it, a message. She wrote numbers from memory, the last GPS coordinates she had seen on Rodrigo's map before they got lost. She also wrote the letter J, the first letter of his name, in case someone found it and recognized the guide. "Maybe this will help Michael," she told Lily, who smiled faintly. "Daddy's looking for us, I know it," Lily said softly. Michael held the photo of the carved tree in his hands. The GPS numbers, 2.3156 degrees north, 69.8467 degrees west, were clear. The letter J was written below. He knew it was from Sarah. He could feel it. She was smart and careful, and she always thought ahead. She had remembered the coordinates Rodrigo showed her earlier in the trip. That meant they were still trying to find their way out. That meant they were still alive. Michael felt hope grow inside him like a fire. He showed the tree photo to the local police and begged them to shift the search toward that location. Some officers agreed, while others warned it was dangerous and far from their current search zone. But Michael didn't care. He was willing to go alone if he had to. Joao and the jungle trackers agreed to go with him. They packed fresh food, clean water, medicine, ropes, and radios. The trek to the new coordinates was not easy. They had to move slowly through thick vines and deep puddles. Giant ants crawled over fallen logs, and poisonous frogs sat on wet leaves. At night, strange howls echoed through the trees. But Michael kept moving step by step. Sometimes, he saw a flower Sarah had once photographed or a tree that reminded him of the pictures she sent. These small things pushed him forward. Back in the jungle, Sarah and Lily were doing their best to stay near the area where she had carved a message. They had no idea if anyone had found it, but they didn't want to wander too far. They set up a small shelter with branches and leaves, and Rodrigo built a simple trap to catch small animals. They cooked what they could over a fire and boiled muddy water to make it safer to drink. It wasn't much, but it was enough to survive. Lily had grown quieter. She didn't laugh like she used to, but she held on to her mother's hand with strength. "I believe in you, Mommy," she whispered one night. That gave Sarah just enough energy to keep going. On the 63rd day, Michael and the team reached the area near the tree. It looked like the jungle hadn't been touched in weeks. Everything was quiet, except for the soft buzz of insects and the distant sound of birds. Joao stopped and pointed at the ground. "Footprints," he said. They followed the prints, moving slowly and carefully. Then one of the men shouted. "Cloth," he said, holding up a torn piece of orange fabric. Michael's heart leaped. It was the same color as the life vest Sarah and Lily had worn. They rushed forward, now shouting, calling names. "Sarah! Lily!" Far off, Sarah was sitting by the fire when she thought she heard something. At first, she wasn't sure. Her ears played tricks on her sometimes. But then she heard it again, shouting, a voice, her name. "Sarah!" She stood up, nearly falling over. "Lily, did you hear that?" Lily opened her eyes slowly. "Daddy," she whispered. Sarah grabbed a stick and waved it, running out into the open. "Here! Over here!" she screamed. Moments later, Michael burst through the trees, muddy and soaked, his face covered in sweat and tears. He saw Sarah and ran to her, wrapping his arms around her tightly. "You're alive," he cried. "You're alive." Lily smiled weakly from the ground, and Michael scooped her up. "I miss you so much, baby," he said, holding her close. Rodrigo limped out from behind the shelter. He looked tired and thin, but he nodded at Michael. "I did what I could," he said softly. Michael nodded back. "Thank you. You kept them safe." The rescue team quickly gave them water and food. They wrapped Lily in a dry blanket and helped Rodrigo walk. Sarah kept holding Michael's hand, like she never wanted to let go. "I knew you'd find us," she whispered. The helicopter arrived 2 hours later, landing in a small clearing the team had prepared. The wind from the blades blew leaves and dust everywhere. Sarah held Lily tightly as the rescue workers helped them climb aboard. Michael stayed close, refusing to let go of his wife or daughter. Rodrigo was lifted in next, his injured ankle carefully wrapped. As the helicopter rose above the treetops, Sarah looked down at the vast green jungle below. For the first time in over 9 weeks, she felt like she could finally breathe. Lily fell asleep in her arms, exhausted but safe. Michael kissed Sarah's forehead and whispered, "We're going home." When they arrived at the hospital in Manaus, doctors were waiting. Sarah and Lily were taken for full checkups. They had lost weight, were dehydrated, and had dozens of insect bites, but there were no serious injuries. Rodrigo also received treatment, and Michael made sure he got everything he needed. Sarah cried when she saw herself in the mirror. Her face was thinner, her hair dirty and tangled, and her arms were covered in scratches. But when Lily reached for her hand and smiled, it didn't matter. They had survived. They were together, and that was all that counted. News of their survival spread quickly. Reporters came from everywhere, asking questions, trying to get pictures. Michael politely asked them to wait. "We're just thankful they're alive," he told the cameras. "That's all that matters." The doctor said Sarah and Lily needed rest and nutrition. The hospital let them stay as long as they needed. Every night, Michael sat beside Sarah's bed and held her hand as she slept. Sometimes she would wake up from bad dreams, memories of getting lost, hearing wild animals, or thinking Lily might die. Michael would calm her down and remind her they were safe now. Slowly, day by day, she began to heal. After 2 weeks, the family was strong enough to fly home. The airport was filled with people waiting for them. Friends, neighbors, and strangers cheered as they walked off the plane. Sarah wore sunglasses and held Lily's hand tightly. Michael had one arm around both of them. Reporters asked questions, but Sarah only said a few quiet words. "We never gave up, and Michael never stopped searching. That's why we're here." At home, people brought food, flowers, and cards. The town held a welcome back party, and the mayor gave Michael a small medal for his courage and determination. But what touched Sarah the most was what she found waiting on the kitchen table. A photo of the tree she had carved on, printed out and placed in a silver frame. Below it, Michael had written a note. "This was a moment I knew you were alive. She hugged him tightly and cried. "That tree saved us," she said. "If you hadn't found it—" Her voice broke. Michael shook his head. "You left a clue because you knew I'd be looking. You saved yourself." Months passed, and life slowly returned to normal. Sarah returned to teaching, and Lily went back to school. Sometimes Lily would talk about the jungle, drawing pictures of trees and rivers in her notebook. Sarah and Michael decided to write down their story, hoping it might help others. They titled it 9 Weeks in the Green Prison, and soon publishers became interested. The book would tell how love, hope, and courage help a mother and daughter survive the most dangerous place on earth. As for Rodrigo, he returned to his village, where people welcomed him as a hero. Though he had gotten them lost, he had also stayed by their side and helped them survive. Michael stayed in contact with him and sent supplies and money to support his family. "We owe you more than you know," he said during one video call. Rodrigo smiled humbly and replied, "We all did what we could." And so, A Nightmare in the Heart of the Jungle became a story of survival, love, and never giving up. Though Sarah and Lily would always remember the fear, they would also remember the strength they found within, and the man who refused to stop searching until he brought them home.